Elias Thorne was 55 years old, which meant, by galactic standards, he was already decomposing. He hung suspended in the void, magnetic boots clamped to the hull of the Citadel of Light. Beneath his feet, the station was a marvel of translucent pearl and singing energy, a structure of the size of a moon that orbited the singularity of the Sagittarius A** black hole. Inside those crystalline spires lived the Aethel, beings of pure light, immortal, timeless, and infinitely bored. Above him, tethered by a frayed carbon table, floated his ship, the Hephaestus. It was a rusted, blocky tugboat that looked like a brick thrown through a stained-glass window. "Oxygen check, Commander," a voice crackled in his earpiece. It was Holloway, his pilot, young, eager, and terrified of heights. "Steady at 80%, Elias grunted. He adjusted the focal lens of his plasma welder. "I'm almost done with the seal. Tell the Highness inside to stop vibrating the hull, or I'm going to weld his window shut." Elias struck the arc. Blue fire bloomed in the vacuum, knitting together a hairline fracture in the station's waste heat exhaust. It was dangerous work. The radiation here, bleeding off the station's shield, would cook a human in 10 minutes without a Lee-line suit. The Aethel, safe inside their energy fields, wouldn't even notice the leak. But if the exhaust backed up, the thermal variance would drop the ambient temperature in the royal gardens by 3 degrees. And the Aethel did not like to be chilly. "Unidentified scavenger vessel," a voice caught through the comms. It wasn't Holloway. It was a sound like wind chiming through glass, melodic, perfect, and utterly devoid of warmth. Elias sighed, deactivating the torch. "This is the Hephaestus, heavy industrial repair. We are under contract, station control. And my name is Commander Thorne. Your designation is irrelevant," the voice replied. A hologram flickered to life on Elias's hood. It was High Architect Xylan. The alien appeared as a pillar of shifting geometric light, encased in a containment suit of gold filigree. He was beautiful, in the way a diamond is beautiful, hard, cold, and capable of cutting you. "You have exceeded your allotted repair window by 4 minutes, Xylan stated. "The sight of your vessel is disrupting the meditation of the third ring. Remove it." Elias looked at the weld. It needed another pass. If he left it now, the stressed fracture would expand. "Architect, if I don't finish this seal, your thermal regulation will drift. Your gardens will freeze. We can adjust the internal atmospherics," Xylan dismissed, "but we cannot adjust the aesthetic blight of your ship blocking the starlight. Logic dictates that visual harmony is more efficient for the collective psyche than thermal precision. Leave. Now." Elias gripped the welder. His knuckles turned white inside the heavy gloves. This was the galaxy. The Aethel lived for 10,000 years. They spent centuries debating the curvature of a single archway. Humans were the frantic, scurrying things that kept the lights on. They were the Mayflies, born in the morning, dead by twilight, forgotten by the stars. Acknowledged, Elias spat. Packing up. He finished the weld anyway. A messy, quick job, but it would hold. Not because he feared Xylan, but because he refused to leave a job half-done. It was the only pride he had left since Earth had burned itself out 3 generations ago. He uncoupled his boots and let the wind drag him back to the Hephaestus. The airlock cycled with a hiss of decontamination steam. Elias pulled off his helmet, taking a deep breath of the ship's air. It smelled of recycled coffee, machine oil, and sweat. It smelled like home. "Did the shiny ghost yell at you?" Holloway asked, swiveling in his chair as Elias stepped onto the bridge. "He politely suggested we cease existing in his general direction," Elias said, dropping into the command chair. The leather was cracked and worn. "Set course for the support ring. We need to refuel before we head back to the rim." The support ring was the ugly metal halo detached from the main citadel. It was where the lesser species lived. The humans, the reptilian Progan laborers, the insectoid engineers, the servants' quarters. Course laid in, Holloway said. Man, look at them. Elias looked out the viewport. The Citadel was rotating slowly, catching the light of the accretion disk. It was breathtaking. A monument to eternity. They think they're gods, Cap, Holloway whispered. They live forever, Holloway, Elias murmured, rubbing his tired eyes. When you live forever, you stop looking at the ground. You forget what it's like to trip. Suddenly, the proximity alarm screamed. It wasn't the rhythmic beep of a collision warning. It was a flat, continuous tone that indicated a sensor failure. Report. Elias barked, adrenaline snapping him awake. I don't know, Holloway stammered, his fingers flying over the console. Sensors aren't blind. Rear quadrant. It's not a ship. It's nothing. Elias pulled up the rear camera feed. The stars were gone. Behind them, the starfield wasn't just black. It was absent. A perfect, growing sphere of absolute void was eating the light. It rippled like oil on water, silent and hungry. It's an entropy storm, Elias whispered. He had heard the legends from the old deep spacers. A cosmic error. A region of space where physics simply gave up. It's moving fast, Holloway yelled, his voice cracking. Impact with the Citadel in 12 minutes. Hail the station, Elias ordered. Tell Xylon. Tell them to raise the void shields. I can't. Holloway cried. They're jamming us. There, Cap, look at the Citadel. Elias looked. The lights on the Citadel of Light didn't flicker. They didn't turn red for alert. They turned off. High Architect Xylon did not feel panic. Panic was a biological inefficiency, a flood of cortisol that clouded judgment. Xylon felt only the equation. He stood in the center of the council chamber, a room of pure white data streams. The threat assessment scrolled before him in irrefutable logic. Threat designation, class alpha entropy wave. Origin, unknown. Target, high energy signatures, the Citadel core. Time to impact, 11 minutes, 43 seconds. Analysis, Xylon commanded. His voice joined the chorus of the 12 other high architects, a hive mind of light. Shields are ineffective, the second architect responded. The wave deconstructs matter at the subatomic level. It feeds on resistance. If we raised the shields, we merely provide it with more fuel. Conclusion, Xylon stated. The Citadel cannot survive intact. The sentence hung in the air, heavier than a neutron star. The Citadel had stood for 50,000 years. It was the library of the galaxy, the repository of art, science, and the Aethel race itself. However, the third architect interjected, the data stream shifting to a schematic of the station. The wave is attracted to mass and energy density. If we reduce our mass, we can increase our escape velocity. Xylon looked at the schematic. The Citadel was composed of 2 rings. The inner ring, the housing for the Aethel, the archives, and the Royal Yacht Fleet. The outer ring, the industrial sector, the docks, the support ring. The support ring contained 3 million workers, humans, Rogan, the Hephaestus. It also contained the Sanctum of Origins, the dormant nursery where the next generation of Aethel were incubating in stasis crystals. 10,000 unhatched souls. The logic is clear, Xylon said. The words tasted like ash, but the math was flawless. The support ring acts as a sea anchor. If we remain coupled, we all perish. Probability, 100%. If we decouple, the second architect continued, the support ring's mass will attract the wave. It will buy the inner ring time to activate the hyperdrives. Survival probability for the inner ring, 94%. And the nursery? Someone asked. The unhatched? Xylon hesitated. For a microsecond, His light dimmed. To abandon the young was a crime against the species. But the equation was absolute. We can breed more kin, Xylon said cold, hard. It will take a millennium, but the biological material can be replicated. We cannot replace us. We are the sum of galactic knowledge. If the elders die, the culture dies. If the nursery dies, it is merely a setback. He looked at the display. The red wave of entropy was closing in. Initiate separation protocol, Xylon ordered. Sever the maglocks. On the bridge of the Hephaestus, the world shook. Elias was thrown against the console as the artificial gravity fluctuated. What did they do? He groaned, wiping blood from his forehead. Did they fire the main guns? No, Holloway whispered. He was staring out the viewport, his face pale as the moon. Cap, they let go. Elias pulled himself up. Through the reinforced glass, he saw the unthinkable. The glittering, beautiful inner ring of the Citadel was drifting away. The massive magnetic clamps that held the station together had retracted. Thrusters on the inner ring fired, brilliant, clean blue light, pushing the palace of the gods away from the storm. They were accelerating, and they were leaving the outer ring behind. They cut us loose, Holloway screamed. Those shiny bastards cut us loose. Elias watched the gap widen. He saw the lights of the support ring flickering. 3 million souls were on that ring. People who fixed the toilets, scrubbed the filters, and polished the gold. They're using us as bait, Elias realized. His voice was low, terrifyingly calm. We're the heavy meal. The storm eats us while they run. The comms panel lit up. It was a general broadcast from the fleeing Citadel. Xylon's voice filled the bridge, smooth and apologetic. Attention, servant or cast. The Citadel has initiated emergency preservation protocols. Due to mass constraints, the outer ring could not be saved. Your sacrifice will ensure the preservation of galactic history. We shall remember you in the archives. Do not panic. The end will be instantaneous. Instantaneous? Holloway laughed hysterically. That's comforting. That's great. Elias didn't laugh. He looked at the fleeing ships of the Aethel. They were beautiful, graceful, and cowardly. They had traded 3 million lives and their own children for a 94% chance of survival. He looked at the sensor scope. The Entropy Storm was a wall of black static, 5 minutes away. The escape pods from the support ring were launching, tiny specks of light trying to outrun the hurricane. They wouldn't make it. The Hephaestus wouldn't make it. Logic dictated they sit down and die. Logic dictated they accept their role as Mayflies. Elias unbuckled his safety harness. He stood up. Holloway, Elias said, how much fusion fuel do we have in the main tanks? What? 90%. Why? And the magnetic grappling claw, Elias pointed to the heavy industrial winch controls. Is it rated for towing battleships? Yes, Cap, but, good. Elias sat back down. He grabbed the throttle. He didn't push it forward to flay. He pulled it back. He spun the ship around. The Hephaestus turned its nose away from the safety of deep space and faced the oncoming storm. What are you doing? Holloway shrieked. The Aethel run on logic. Holloway, Elias said, his eyes hard as flint. They did the math. They saved themselves. Elias punched a sequence into the nav computer. He locked the ship's trajectory. But they forgot one thing, Elias growled. We aren't Aethel. We don't do the math. We do the job. He slammed his hand on the intercom. All hands, this is the commander. We are not running. We are going to latch onto the support ring. We are going to drag that heavy piece of junk out of the gravity well, or we are going to burn out our engine trying. Cap, that's suicide. Holloway cried. We can't tow a moon. Not with that attitude, Elias smiled. It was a terrifying, feral smile. Power to the magnets. Open the throttle wide. Let's show these immortals how a mayfly dies. The universe screamed. It wasn't a sound carried by air, but a vibration carried by the hull of the Hephaestus. The heavy industrial tug shuddered as it slammed into reverse thrust, fighting its own momentum to drift back toward the abandoned support ring. Targeting the primary magmock, Holloway yelled, his hands flying across the controls. He was weeping openly now, tears streaming sideways across his face due to the G-forces, but he didn't stop working. Distance, 2 kilometers. Closing speed, too fast. Cap, we're going to shear the bolts. Line it up, Holloway, Elias cried out. He was fighting the yoke with both hands, his muscles screaming. Deploy the tow cables. Harpoon that bastard. The Hephaestus was a brick, but Elias flew her like a scalpel. He spun the ship, aiming the rear array at the massive, dark bulk of the support ring. THOM. The magnetic grapples fired. 4 thick tungsten carbide cables shot across the void, impacting the support ring's docking struts. They magnetized instantly. The jolt nearly snapped Elias's neck. The Hephaestus groaned, a terrifying, metallic shriek of alloy being stretched past its yield point. Warning lights turned the bridge into a disco of red and orange. We're hooked. Holloway screamed. Inertial dampeners are at 110%. We're dragging a moon, Cap, full forward thrust. Elias roared. Burn it. Burn everything. The main engines lit up white hot. The ship shook violently, trying to pull the massive, skyscraper-laden ring out of the path of the encroaching dark. Then, the comms screen flickered. The image was distorted by the radiation of the approaching storm, but the golden, impassive face of Height Architect Xylon cut through the static. Commander Thorne, Xylon's voice was no longer melodic. It was laced with a glitching, digital confusion. Telemetry indicates you have tethered yourself to the Doom sector. You are moving toward the anomaly. This is a navigation error. Correct immediately. Elias didn't look at the screen. He was watching the engine temperature gauge climb into the critical zone. No error, Xylon, we're taking the ring with us. Xylon blinked. It was a slow, deliberate motion, the first sign of genuine processing lag the alien had ever shown. That is, mathematically impossible. The mass of the ring exceeds your thrust capacity by a factor of 6. You cannot outrun the entropy wave. You will be consumed in 4 minutes. Maybe, Elias grunted, wrestling the ship as a gravity shear tried to spin them out. But we're buying them time to get to the escape pods on the far side. Why? Xylon demanded. The word was sharp, piercing. The support ringhouse's workers. Replaceable biological units. And the sanctum, the larva, Xylon paused. You are aware the sanctum contains the offspring of the Aethel, the children of the very council that just abandoned you? I know, Elias said. Then explain. Xylon insisted, his golden shell pulsing with agitated light. Why die for the young of a species that views you as dust? It violates the survival imperative. It creates a deficit in the equation. Why are you staying? Elias finally looked at the screen. His nose was bleeding. His uniform was soaked in sweat. He looked old, broken, and utterly human. You have all the answers, don't you, Xylon? Elias rasped. You have your equations and your probabilities. You calculated that leaving your kids behind gave you a 94% chance to live. Smart. Logical. Elias pushed the throttle past the safety stop. The ship screamed. But here's the thing about us Mayflies, Elias said softly. We don't have forever. We don't have time to do the math. When we see a child in a fire, we don't calculate the odds of getting burned. Then what dictates your action? Xylon asked, genuinely paralyzed by the lack of data. We go in, Elias said, because no one else will. He severed the connection. Holloway. Elias barked. Dump the reserve coolant into the reactor. Give me everything she's got. She's gonna blow, Cap. Not yet, she isn't. Pull. The silence arrived. It wasn't a storm of wind or lightning. It was an erasure. Elias watched on the rear monitor as the stars behind him simply vanished. The entropy wave was a curtain of absolute nothingness. When it touched the edge of a communications satellite, the metal didn't explode. It unraveled. Atoms forgot how to hold onto each other. The satellite dissolved into dust, then into energy, then into void. Rear shields are gone. Holloway yelled. The young pilot's voice was thin, reedy with terror. It's eating the wake. The Hephaestus was vibrating so hard Elias's vision blurred. The G-force was crushing his chest, making every breath a battle. They were moving, but not fast enough. The support ring was a massive anchor, a millions of tons deadweight dragging them back into the dark. Come on, old girl, Elias whispered to the ship, patting the dashboard. Just a little further. The heat in the cockpit was rising. The radiation shielding was stripping away. Elias could feel the taste of metal in his mouth, the distinct flavor of dying cells. Cap, Holloway said. He wasn't looking at the controls anymore. He was looking at a photo taped to his console. A girl and the dog in a wheat field on a terraformed colony. It's not enough. The math, the alien was right. The wave is faster. Elias looked at the telemetry. The wave was closing at 500 meters per second. They were only pulling at 300. The silence would catch the support ring in 2 minutes. The Hephaestus couldn't save them by pulling. You're right, Elias said. The realization washed over him, not with fear, but with a strange, calm clarity. We can't outrun it. He looked at the readouts of the entropy wave. It tracked high energy sources. It was drawn to density. That's why it wanted the Citadel. Holloway, Elias said, his voice steady. Eject the core. Holloway froze. What? The fusion core, Elias said. If we eject it while it's running at 300% overload, it'll be the brightest thing in this sector. A miniature sun. But without the core, Holloway turned to look at Elias. We lose containment. The ship becomes a bomb. We will vaporize. Yes, Elias said, but the explosion will sever the cables and push the support ring away. And the flare will distract the beast. It'll try to eat the explosion instead of the ring. It was the only play left. The Hail Mary. Set the timer for 30 seconds, Elias ordered. Then get to the escape pod. No, Holloway said. He turned back to the console. He locked his magnetic boots to the floor. Pod launch takes 40 seconds. I'm not leaving. Elias looked at his pilot. The kid was terrified, shaking, snot running down his nose. But his hands were steady on the fuel mixture. It's been an honor, Commander, Holloway whispered. The honor is mine, son, Elias replied. Elias opened the ship-wide channel. He spoke to the millions on the support ring, the terrified workers, the 90s guarding the crystal eggs of the Aethel. This is the Hephaestus, Elias said. We are cutting you loose. Brace for shockwave. And tell them we didn't run. Elias turned the safety key on the reactor. Core injection sequence initiated. The computer chimed pleasantly. Warning, critical mass imminent. The entropy wave loomed large in the viewport. It was a wall of black glass, reflecting nothing. It was the end of all things. Elias watched it come. He didn't feel small. For the first time in his life, in front of the infinite dark, he felt enormous. Hey, Xylan, Elias whispered to the empty air, imagining the immortal watching from his safe, distant yacht. Check your math on this one. He slammed his hand onto the manual override. The fusion core of the Hephaestus didn't just vent. It detonated. It was a bloom of pure, blinding white light, a star born and dying in a microsecond. The force of the blast disintegrated the ship instantly. There was no pain, only light. The shockwave hit the support ring, snapping the tow cables and shoving the massive station violently forward, surfing the wave of kinetic energy away from the void. And behind them, the Entropy Storm recoiled. Confused by the sudden, massive spike of energy, the mindless cosmic predator paused to feed on the fireball that used to be a rusty tugboat and 2 human souls. For a moment, the void was filled with fire. And then, silence. But this time, it wasn't the silence of emptiness. It was the silence of a debt that could never be repaid. The explosion was not elegant. Aethel technology destroyed matter with whispering beams of coherent light, leaving no ash, no residue. It was clean. The death of the Hephaestus was filthy. It was a raw, chaotic vomit of plasma, superheated alloy, and unspent fusion fuel. It bloomed in the vacuum like a bruised, and nubbly, violent sphere of expanding gas that defied the pristine darkness of space. From the observation deck of the Royal Yacht Ethelgerd, High Architect Xylan watched the event with unblinking optical sensors. He saw the shockwaves strike the support ring. He saw the massive, lumbering structure of the servant cast groan under the impact, surfing the kinetic wave away from the mouth of the Entropy Storm. He saw the storm, that mindless, hungering beast of physics, lurch forward. It bypassed the fleeing support ring. It did exactly what the human commander had predicted. It fed on the flare. It wrapped its tendrils of nothingness around the expanding fireball of the Hephaestus, consuming the energy in a gluttonous frenzy. And then, satisfied or confused by the sudden intake of density, the storm destabilized. It collapsed in on itself, dissolving back into the subspace rift from which it came. The stars returned. The void was empty again. The Hephaestus was gone. The support ring was safe. The Citadel was intact. On the bridge of the Ethelgerd, the silence was absolute. Thousands of Aethel stood in their crystalline stations. They were beings of light and logic, capable of processing 1 trillion calculations a second. Yet, in this moment, the data stream was frozen. No one spoke. No one moved. The humming choir of the ship's drive seemed to drop an octave. Morning, report, Xylan whispered. His voice was faint, lacking its usual harmonic resonance. The second architect looked up from her console. Her light form, usually a brilliant gold, was dim, flickering with a color that looked suspiciously like gray. Entropy wave dissipated, she reported, support ring intact. Casualties on the ring, 0. Casualties on the Hephaestus, total. Xylan stared at the view screen. He stared at the empty patch of space where a rusty brick of a ship had stood moments ago. He ran the simulation again in his mind. He adjusted the variables. Variable E, the human ship was slow, unarmed, and statistically insignificant. Variable B, the humans knew the Aethel had abandoned them. Variable C, the humans chose to die to save the offspring of the species that abandoned them. Result, undefined. Why? Xylan asked. It wasn't a rhetorical question. It was a plea to the universe. The equation does not balance. They gained nothing. They lost everything. It is irrational. High Architect, the second architect said softly, I am detecting a transmission from the support ring. Put it on. The audio filled the bridge. It wasn't a military report. It was a sound Xylan had not heard in 10,000 years. It was weeping. 3 million voices, humans, Krogans, insectoids, crying out in a cacophony of grief. They were ensuring their survival. They were mourning their saviors. Xylan felt a sensation he had no name for. It started in his core and gradiated outward, chilling his light. It was a heaviness, a hollowness. He looked at his hands, perfect, golden, immortal hands that had built stars and sculpted nebulas. And for the first time in his existence, they looked small. We ran, Xylan whispered. The bridge crew turned to look at him. "We calculated the odds," Xylan said, his voice rising, vibrating with a strange new frequency. "We applied the logic of eternity. We determined that our lives were worth more than theirs, that our history was worth more than their future." He pointed a trembling finger at the empty void. "And the Mayflies proved us wrong." He walked to the main tactical display. He pulled up the personnel file of Commander Elias Thorne, a grainy 2D image of a biological male. Gray hair, wrinkled skin, tired eyes, a creature that leaked fluids and required sleep, a creature that would have died of old age in a mere 30 cycles. "He called us gods," Xylan murmured. "But gods do not flee while mortals burn." The shame hit the Aethel collective like a physical blow. It wasn't a data packet, it was a contagion. Across the fleet, lights dimmed. The immortal arrogance that had sustained them for eons shattered under the weight of a single human decision. "Architect," the comms officer said, "the council is demanding a status update. They wish to know if the nursery is secure." Xylan looked at the blinking light of the council. "The logical, safe, cowardly council. Tell them the nursery is safe," Xylan said. "Tell them it was saved by the Hephaestus." He turned to the navigation officer. "Set a course for the blast coordinates." "Hi, Architect." The navigator hesitated. "There is nothing there. Only radiation and dust. There is nothing to recover." "We are not going to recover wreckage," Xylan said. His form began to brighten, shifting from the cold of preservation to a blinding white of resolve. "We are going to retrieve them." "Retrieve them?" The second architect stepped forward. "Sir, biology cannot survive fusion. They are atomized. They are dead." Xylan looked at her. He looked at the empty space where the irrational empathy of a human had outshined a billion years of Aethel logic. "We are the masters of matter," Xylan declared, his voice thundering through the ship. "We have terraformed suns. We have woven black holes. Do not tell me what is impossible." He accessed the Genesis protocol, the forbidden archive, the power reserved for the creation of new universes. It was a power they had been too afraid to use, for fear of the cost. "They gave their today for our tomorrow," Xylan said. "It is time we've spent our forever to give them back their yesterday." "Prepare the Genesis siphon," Xylan ordered. "We are going to catch their ghosts before they fade." The bridge were silent again, but this time it wasn't the silence of cowardice. It was the silence of a church before the choir begins. It was the reverent, terrified silence of a people who had just witnessed a miracle and were now preparing to perform one. "Course set," the navigator whispered. "Engage," Xylan said, "and let the galaxy record it today. The Aethel learned how to be human." Earth was a tombstone. Seen from orbit, it was a bruised marble of brown and gray. The oceans had receded centuries ago. The atmosphere was a thin, choking haze of industrial smog. It was a planet that had spent itself to reach the stars, leaving nothing behind but dust and the quiet desperation of those too poor to leave. Then, the sky opened. It didn't rain water. It rained gold. The Aethel fleet, 10,000 ships strong, descended from the void. They did not come with weapons hot. They came with their shields lowered. They formed a ring round the dying world, a halo of crystalline light. High Architect Xylan stood on the bridge of the Ethelgard, looking down at the cradle of humanity. "Initiate the Genesis protocol," Xylan commanded. "High Architect," the science officer warned, "the energy requirement is absolute. It will drain the Citadel's reserves by 40%. It will shorten our own lifespans by millennia." Xylan looked at the gray planet. He thought of Elias Thorne pulling the lever to incinerate himself for strangers. "A fair price," Xylan whispered. "Accidioid." The ships fired. Beams of terraforming energy, the breath of stars, struck the planet. Clouds roiled and turned white. Oceans boiled, not with heat, but with creation. refilling the basins with azure blue. Brown continents turned emerald green as biology was accelerated, mutated, and healed in seconds. In the span of an hour, the Aethel gave Earth back its garden. But they were not done. Xylon turned to the center of the bridge, where the siphon contained the energy signature retrieved from the blast zone of the Hephaestus. It was a chaotic, violent swirl of human souls, caught in the moment of their destruction. "We cannot give them back their bodies," Xylon said to the silence of the room. "Flesh is weak. Flesh forgets. If we put them back in meat, they will die again." He manipulated the controls of the Genesis matrix, "So we will make them like us. But better, we will give them the fire they love so much." The siphon opened. Elias Thorne woke up. He expected darkness. He expected the cold nothingness of death. Instead, he felt warm. He looked at his hands. They were unscarred, wrinkled, or stained with grease. They were translucent. They were made of weaving, shifting light, like the filament of an old bulb, burning steady and bright. He looked up. He wasn't on the bridge of the rusty Hephaestus. He was standing on a platform of light, floating above a green, vibrant earth. Next to him stood Holloway. The young pilot was looking at his own glowing chest in disbelief. Around him, the rest of the crew, engineers, loaders, cooks, shimmered in similar forms. "Cap?" Holloway's voice didn't come from air vibrating against vocal cords. It projected directly into Elias's mind, clear as a bell. Are we dead?" "No," a melodic voice answered. "You are preserved." Elias turned. Xylon stood there, but the alien wasn't towering over them in arrogance anymore. The High Architect was kneeling, one knee on the ground, head bowed. "Architect?" Elias asked. He tried to step forward, and he found he drifted, weightless. "What did you do?" Xylon stood slowly. He looked tired. The golden luster of his shell was dimmer, aged by the energy he had expended. "You taught us a variable we had forgotten, Commander," Xylon said. "You taught us that a life is not measured by its length, but by its density, by how brightly it burns." Xylon gestured to the earth below, blue, green, and alive. "We have restored your cradle. No human will ever starve again. No human will ever suffocate." Elias looked at the paradise below. He felt a lump in his throat he no longer possessed. "And us?" Elias asked. "What are we?" "You are the Solari," Xylon announced. "We used the Genesis protocol to bind your consciousness to the fabric of subspace. You are pure energy. You are immortal." Xylon paused, looking at the glowing crew. "We, the Aethel, are the mind of the galaxy. We keep the history. We calculate the paths." Xylon stepped closer to Elias. "But a mind without a heart is cruel, and a galaxy without a shield is vulnerable. We cannot fight the dark, Elias. We are too afraid to lose our forever. But you," Xylon looked into Elias's eyes of burning stellar fire. "You are never afraid. So, we offer you a choice. You may fade into the peace of the afterlife, or you may stay, not as servants, but as guardians." Elias looked at Holloway. He looked at his crew. He looked at the vast, starry dark where the Entropy Storm had been. He felt the power coursing through him, the power of a star, bound by the will of a man. He didn't need to ask his crew. He felt their answer in the length. They were tired of being Mayflies. They were ready to be dragons. "We'll stay," Elias said. His voice sounded like thunder rolling over a mountain. "Good," Xylon smiled. It was a genuine, warm smile. "Then take your station, Commander." Epilogue. The new era, the galaxy changed. The Galactic Council still met in the Citadel of Light. The Aethel still debated philosophy and art. But the seating arrangement was different. At the center of the council chamber, there was a new seat. It was simple, made of iron, and it remained empty. No one was allowed to sit there. It was reserved for the Terran representative. Humanity was no longer ignored. When a human ship entered a harbor, elder races dipped their shields in respect, not because humans were rich and not because they conquered, but because every species in the galaxy knew the story. They knew that when the Great Silence came, the Immortals ran, and the humans stood still. And out in the deep void, on the edge of the rim where the monsters lurked, travelers would sometimes report a sighting. They spoke of a ship that wasn't a ship, a vessel made of pure, blinding hard light, shaped like an ancient, blocky tugboat. It patrolled the darkness, silent and eternal. They say that if you are lost, or if you are in danger, you don't pray to the Aethel. You broadcast a distress signal on the old analog frequencies. And if you are lucky, the Hephaestus will answer. Burning pride. Holding the line.